Welcome everybody to the first ever of hopefully will be many jam sessions. This is going to become part of my new Skill Sessions membership, although right now this first one is open to everybody. But moving forward, we're going to do one of these a month and they will be open to members only. You can go to joshspector.com/sessions to join and become a member. In addition to obviously these open monthly Q&As, once every 2 months, I put out a new session on a specific topic. And those are more presentations that I put together, whereas this is going to be a little free form. The skill sessions, when you join, you get access to all 8 I've already published, and you get the next 6 that we do over the course of the next year. Those 6 are topics that members get to vote on. So to make sure that I'm doing stuff that you guys actually want to learn about. Also, as a member, you get to attend those sessions live. You get to ask questions, and everything is also available on demand. So both these jam sessions and the regular sessions. One other note about that is that the skill session membership price is going to go up. It's currently $150 a year. It's going to go to $197 on May 23rd. So if you're thinking about joining, now is a good time to do it. Save yourself some money. You'll get it at that rate for as long as you want it. And of course, you're welcome to cancel at any time. So how we're going to do this jam session, again, first time, a little bit of a work in progress. But what I think we're going to do is, if you want to either raise your hand if you have a question, or post your question or post in the chat and say you have a question, Emily will call you up. You're welcome to ask me about anything you want. Business, audience growth, even if you want a quick review of something, a sales page, some copy, you're sending out an email and you're not sure what the subject line should be, we can really touch on whatever you want. I would also encourage everyone who's watching and in the chat, you're welcome to, when people have questions, if you have suggestions, if you have feedback. I'm not the only one who knows stuff here. I know all of you guys have varied expertise. So please feel free to chime in with suggestions for whoever has the question as well. So Emily, before I turn it over to you to call up people for questions, I'm going to go to Jamie first, because I know we had an exchange on Twitter and I know he's excited to be here and I assume he has a question. So Jamie, I'm going to give you the honor of a first ever jam session question. No pressure. What do you want to know?
Way to put me on the spot there, Josh. I didn't specifically have a question, although I did just start doing one-on-one consulting, for basically what I call minimalist side hustles. So basically trying to help people, either start or turn their current side hustle into something more minimalist. So like easier to handle, less time, less investment and stuff like that. So I'd say, what advice would you have for me, somebody that's starting that? I just did my first call on Friday. So the way I'm doing it now is I'm doing a 30-minute call, then I'm preparing an action plan, and then a follow-up call after I've sent the action plan. They've had time to review it. So I'm just curious what you think about that process and what advice you'd have in general for me.
What do you feel like is the most challenging? What to do and how to functionally do the calls, or how to get people to hire you or book the calls?
I mean, it's new, right? So they're both pretty challenging to me, but I would say doing the calls is quite easy, I've found so far. I guess finding more and more people to book them.
Okay. So tell me about like sort of the ideal client, right? Like, so what's their problem? What are you helping them do? They go into the call with X and they come out of the call with what result?
So, I mean, there's basically there's the target that I thought I had, and then what I've been seeing so far is what I thought was people that wanted to have a side hustle and didn't know what to do. But what I'm getting is people that kind of know what they want to do, just not sure how to go about it. So I'm kind of creating a plan for them, how to, start, what's the next step, and then what are the longer term, steps they need to do to get where they want to go.
And do you like that idea as that being the client? Like, because to me, it seems like you're talking about where they are in the journey, and the person that already sort of knows, in my mind, is going to be a better client than the person that's like, I don't know. Right. So to me, and again, there's, as you know, you've heard me talk about this before, like there's infinite ways to succeed and do this. Right. But so if you were asking me, one of the things in following your stuff and the minimalist hustle brand that I think is good is, at times I've sort of been confused of like, well, what is actually minimalist about this? Right. And I think your messaging of people like things being simplified. And so I think if I were you, the messaging of like, this call is going to help you. You want to do this thing. You're already doing X, Y, and Z and taking these steps to do it. I'm going to show you how to simplify your approach. And what you're going to come out of with it is you're going to go from thinking you had to do all these complicated things to on the other end, you're going to have a plan that's like, no, here's how you simplify what you want to get. And if people don't know what they want to get or what they want to do, then they're probably not the right client for that coaching thing, because then you're starting at the beginning and you're spending time helping them try to figure out what to do. So again, there's more than one way to do it, but that's what I would focus on if I were you. And that messaging, because I think lots of people that are pursuing side hustles or any of this stuff, almost all of them feel like it's overcomplicated. And they feel like I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do that. So I think that messaging of like, wow, I can do a half-hour call with this guy and it's going to simplify everything for me is really compelling. So I think that's what I would probably lean into. And then in terms of how you deliver that service, you can start to get to a point of like, if you know everyone's coming in with, I'm doing X, Y, and Z things to get this, and you're going to show them that they only need to do X and Y, or you're going to show them simpler ways to do it, that should over time help the way you actually deliver that service as well, right? And make a clear value, because they're coming out of it going, oh, I don't have to do this, or here's a simpler way to do this. And they can see the sort of before and after versus, oh, he just gave me a bunch of advice and, you know, who knows? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense, and gives me a better vision of who I'm targeting too, actually.
Yeah.
So it's very good.
And check out, you'll see tomorrow morning, I'm posting a thread on Twitter that's going to basically be, I still haven't written it yet, but the prompt is, the first tweet is going to be something like, how many of these 12 things sound like you? And it's going to be a list of things that my ideal audience, it's to promote these skill sessions actually. And then at the end, it's going to be, if you resonate with these things, then my skill sessions are for you. And I think it's a format that you could adapt, right? If you're pursuing a side hustle, how many of these things sound like you?
Right. Yeah, no.
And then, and it helps you even clarify sort of who it's for. So cool.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Emily, who's next?
We have Merrick up next with a couple of questions, one specifically about your podcast strategy.
Cool. Merrick, you there?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Josh. Hi, Emily. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my first question is related to your podcast. And you used to divide your podcast into smaller, like 10 to 15 minutes chunks and publish them on YouTube separately. Now you switch to shorter clips. Why? Why did you make this change? And are you happy with the results?
Yeah, it's a good question. So originally our first thought, and you know, the podcast is the first time I've done anything on YouTube. So new to the platform, you know, besides use it, obviously, but the first time I posted. So initially my thought was like, okay, I want to have more than just the full episodes. We've structured this show in a way that's very easy to sort of clip and curate. And we'll just take each question, which is about a 10 to 15 minute segment, and put them out, right? When I start anything, I'm very much like, what is the minimum? Like, let's just get it out there and not, you know, we're still very early on YouTube, right? Thumbnails, descriptions, there's a million things we could be doing better. So that's where we started. But as we went along, I started to realize and think, you know what, like there's individual clips. People don't necessarily need the full 10 to 15 minute conversation about that question, right? That maybe a 2-minute clip, a 1-minute clip, a 5-minute clip is more valuable. And also from a YouTube perspective, I can title it more specifically. This is really going to get you this thing. And I can, again, with so much that I do, I'm all about like value per minute, right? So maybe they don't need to hear the person's full question, and they don't need to hear me saying, well, tell me more about your background and tell me more about this and that, and like us getting into it. Maybe they just need the 1 minute where I'm like, this is what you do with your newsletter or whatever it is. So we started shifting to that. And I feel like personally, it's much better. It's also been much better when I do share those stuff or put them in my newsletter, share them on Twitter. It's just hyper specific and people are right into it, right? And if they want to hear the longer thing, the full episodes are there as well. So that was the thinking behind it. And it's enabled us. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like it's an improvement. And, it also enables, again, from a titling perspective, from everything, it's way more specific. And when people have questions, interestingly enough, it allows me to send them, I get questions all the time about all sorts of stuff. And it allows me to go like, oh, here's the exact thing where I talk about that, as opposed to go listen to this episode and try to find the 22-minute mark and whatever. But I'm curious, like, you noticed it. What do you think about the?
I think it's always difficult to find the balance between the longer content, which seems more valuable, and the shorter content that is, straight to the point, but from the perspective of someone who didn't listen to it, it's like very short, so it seems very brief, very general. So yeah, I get that it may be really helpful and to the point. From the other side, people who haven't listened to it yet may be a bit reluctant about it. So yeah,
there's pros and cons to both. The other thing I would say about it that I just remembered, another reason for it was, at least for the moment, I'm cutting basically 3 clips per episode. And what I realized was they should be the 3 most valuable moments in the show. And if it just so happens that 2 of those 3 came from question 1, as opposed, so if question 1 was clearly more valuable than question 2 and question 3, I should, those should be the clips. So that was the other thing, is breaking from the each full question allowed me to go, what are the 3 best moments of this show? And let me do that, because again, I'm using the clips in that way versus the full episodes, which, by the way, I should say in my newsletter, I link to the full episodes. I just recently started including some highlights as well. But when I would promote the podcast, I was always sending to the full episode link. So I wasn't even sending to those sort of full question links or, whatever. But yeah, there's definitely, it's a work in progress, and I might change my mind, but for now that's what led to it.
Yeah, that makes total sense, especially that in the answer to the first question, there may be 2 or 3 great bits, and like the third question, maybe not that great. Yeah. So just one more question, sure, if you may. For a solopreneur who has limited budget, limited time.
So you mean every solopreneur? But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. Do you know any better way than social media to attract attention?
Who do you want to attract? Or are you just asking in general?
Other solopreneurs.
Okay. I love newsletter ads and newsletter cross promotions. I don't know if you count that as social media or not, but it is a fantastic way to get to people. And outside of newsletter, I would say, find people that have podcasts, even other people's social accounts, right? So if you can build relationships, and are you a Skill Session member yet, by the way?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you've checked out the relationship builder or not, but I talk about how to build. So if you can build relationships, you can leverage other people's audiences. That's the short answer, right? That the best way to do it is everyone's concentrating on building their own social media following, but you don't actually need it if you can find other ways to get in front of other people's followings, right? So if you didn't want to do social at all, that's what I would look to do, right? How can you get booked on a podcast and be interviewed and get in front of their audience, right? How can you get in someone else's newsletter, paid or free, right? What can you create that will other people will share, right? Can you write a blog post that's about how someone does something, and that person's then going to share it with their audience because they go, Chanel, I know one of Emily's favorites, has the Growth in Reverse newsletter. She's building a huge newsletter, and yes, she uses social, but she's doing deep profiles of people with huge audiences. Okay. Not all those people are sharing them, but a lot of people are, right? So that's what I would look to do, right? If you're not going to be building your own social, how can you get in front of other people's audience on social or elsewhere?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Who's next, Emily?
You have Ari is up next with a question about growing on YouTube.
Cool. Hey, Ari.
Hello. Thanks.
I saw you came on with the bass and then you put it down.
I was just on my lessons. So.
I know. All right, go ahead.
Well, I have a whole bunch of questions. So YouTube is one, and a lot of the attendees here have already given me a good link of yours, so I'll definitely check that out. one other question I have is, do you think marketing is more important than creating new stuff, or is new stuff more important than creating marketing? And if I may say why I'm asking this question, I have a fairly big community and a big newsletter, and I have, as I guess everybody has, because the Pareto principle is at work, a small, like 20% of my people buy 80% of, bring me 80% of my revenue. And so once these people had done everything I had to offer, I added new courses for them, new stuff for them, right? So now I'm a little bit feeling like almost I'm being held hostage for the for the necessity to keep creating for them, versus where, for example, my course platform provider, they keep saying, forget creating new stuff. You have so many courses and so many things you already have. Focus on getting new people in. So how do you straddle that? And do you have some advice for that?
When you say new stuff, do you mean new like products, or do you mean new content?
New products, new content, new ways of creating the content or delivering the content. I teach music. So, and I have a book and I have a standalone course, but I noticed that some people would drop off in the course halfway through. So what I did was I created a coaching program, and that took off. And then I noticed that some people really like live interaction with me. So then I created a community, and now I'm a little bit held hostage by having to deliver 3 classes each week and having to keep doing that. And so my question is, what would you be most excited to do? I have a vision of courses and books that I want to yet create, just because of the sake of creating them, because they are quite unique angles. And I also have a bigger vision, because what I'm trying to do on my particular instrument, which is the bass guitar, I want to then expand to other instruments and to other musical styles. So there's a much bigger goal behind that. And my main idea was I want to create all these like milestones in my world, and then sort of have bass be the shining example. And then I can get a piano teacher to do it in their world, a violin teacher, and so forth.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is always lean into what you're most excited to do. And the fact that in your own mind, you're already going, I feel like I'm being held hostage. No one's holding you hostage, right? So the advantage of being a solopreneur is you get to do whatever you want. And what's fascinating is most people they become a solopreneur because they wanted to work for themselves. They want that freedom and that control, but then they very quickly give it all up, because they're like instead of having one boss, they have 20 clients who are bosses or students. And it's like, you forget that like the whole point of this is to be able to do what you want to do. Now, yes, you have to then figure out how to make that work financially, but you should never feel trapped or stuck in anything. Right. So that's the first thing, just from a mindset, to take a step back and go, I say this all the time, where it's like, I'm a big believer in assume success. So assume that whatever direction you go, right? If you were like, I'm not doing these 3 things anymore, that whatever thing you're going to do instead will be successful. Now, you have to figure out how to make that happen. But a lot of times people are like, well, I don't want to abandon this. And then what if the other thing doesn't work out? And it's like, no, like, you were successful there, you'll probably be successful again, even if not at first, like you'll figure it out, right? So that's the first thing, is to get out of sort of feeling trapped. The second thing is, Emily, will you find on our YouTube channel, there's an excerpt, there's a clip video about the 2 lists. I think it was with Rochelle Grayer. So there's an exercise, and we'll put it in the chat, and you guys can watch it. But basically, I suggest you make a list of everything you're doing over the past year. In this case, we'll talk about that generates revenue, but you can also generate value, however you define it. But let's say money, right? So everything. I did this course, I did this coaching, and not just in general, even get specific. So like when I do it, I go, I did a coaching call with this person and a coaching call with this person. And, and I sold ads in my newsletter, and I did X, Y, and Z. So you write a list of everything that you're doing or have done in the last 6 months or year. Then you're going to rank that list by how much revenue or value it created for you, right? This is the stuff that made me the most money. This is the stuff that made me the least money. Then you're going to take that same list and you're going to rank it by how much you enjoyed it. Literally on like an individual level. I liked coaching this person more than I liked coaching this person, but I like doing ads more than that person, whatever it is, right? So now you wind up with these 2 lists of everything that you've done, ranked in order by how much revenue it created for you, and ranked in order of how much enjoyment you had. The stuff that's high revenue creating and high enjoyment, awesome. Like that, you're obviously going to do more of that. The stuff that's low revenue and low enjoyment, you're going to get rid of. Like, you're probably going to get rid of. Like, why are you spending time on that? You don't like it. It's not getting you anything.
How about taxes and accounting?
Yeah. Tell me about it. The stuff that's high on one list, but low on the other. So it's making you a lot of money, but you're not really enjoying it. You want to look at that and you go, what would it take for me to get that to be more enjoyable? So for example, if it's consulting, you might go, I don't enjoy it because I have to do a weekly call. Well, could it only be a monthly call?
Sorry, I'm just pulling
Oh,
up
no problem.
links people
Right.
sending me.
Could it only be a monthly call, or vice versa? Stuff that's low revenue, but high enjoyment. You go, well, how could I increase the revenue from that? So that will give you, that exercise will give you a real snapshot of what you're doing and help you figure out some of the no-brainer stuff to get rid of. And some of the like, okay, well, I can, it can help you sort of strategically think about where you want to go, as opposed to it all floating in your head and going, I don't know, I want to do this, or I don't want to do that. Does that all make sense? Does that sort of answer your question?
It does make sense. I mean, my main, or like a big chunk of my income right now is my membership. And would it be okay if I showed it to you for a minute?
Sure.
Can I share screen?
I think so. Unless, Emily, do you have to give her permission to share it?
Yeah, it looks like it's working. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I built this up on Circle. And my home is Thinkific though for my courses. So I'm doing single sign-on, which means I'm using a ton of Zapier tape to hold it all together, which makes it very difficult when something goes wrong, like somebody uses the wrong link or whatever. So that's one thing I don't like. And then the other thing I don't like is like, I started this in November. When we started, this would, I haven't looked at it for like 3 hours. There would be like messages, notifications, people would have sent stuff, and all of this. And these are membership only. We tried a free tier. I gave that up. But what I mostly do, so there are two things I got this forum. And then this is my calendar of what I teach. And these are live classes that I teach. And there is a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to get a little bit tired out by it all. And I mean,
I'm getting tired just looking at it.
Yeah, I know, I'm like exhausted. But what I've been trying to do to make it worth it is I try, as you said, make short clips, and I put those on YouTube to feed my channel. What I'm also trying to do is to create an archive. So people right now pay, and you will probably say this is way too cheap, and I know it is. They right now pay $99 a month, or some pay even $75 a month, and they're grandfathered in. And I use the trick, which I believe works well. It's where I tell them, if you join now, you can join. This is your founder's discount. As long as you stay a member, you will get this, but you can't let your credit card expire and you can't ever stop. So then you'll sign up with a new rate. And we're now going up to $155 with the next reiteration. But I'm scared of shutting this down because this is $10,000 a month right there.
Right. So, okay. So here's my advice for you. You can unshare your screen if you want. So here's what I think. So number one is I did a podcast with Jay Klaus all about memberships. Emily, if you can post that in the chat, and it's all about like, it's all about paid memberships and how to make them work and how to adjust them and sort of what to do. So you should definitely check that out. Okay. The second thing I would say is you need to get really clear. I would talk to some of your members and get really clear on what they find most valuable. Because my guess is that you're probably guessing at this point. And there's probably a lot of stuff in the membership that they don't necessarily need. The things that are keeping them members may not be what you think. So I would get clarity on that. Okay. Or it may be, I don't know, but I would definitely talk to them. The third thing I would do is I would, as an exercise, pick a number. You go as high as 50% if you want, and say, if you were forced to eliminate 50% of what's in the membership, if you had to do it, what would you get rid of? And I think it's interesting to then think about, if that stuff wasn't there, how much of an impact would it actually have on the bottom line? How many people, if there was 50% less of stuff in there, would actually unsubscribe?
It's a bit tricky with the way I set it up, because all my Mondays classes are for beginners, all the Thursdays are for intermediate, all the advanced are for Fridays. And I do the same song in all three classes. And some people come all the 3 times a week.
But that's why what I like about, you're not going to know. It's a hypothetical exercise. but
Yeah.
by running the exercise where you're forcing yourself to eliminate it. Like if someone literally came to you and said, you need to get rid of 50%. And by the way, it doesn't have to be 50. You could say 30% or whatever you want, right? But you had to get rid of stuff. What would go?
Yeah.
And do that thought exercise, because you're assuming that like, well, the truth is you don't need, and I don't say this for you specifically, I say this for everyone, right? The truth is none of us need all the stuff that we have in our products.
Right.
We just don't know. There's this saying about advertising, like 50% of your advertising money is wasted. You just don't know which 50%. And that's true with this too, right? 50% of the stuff in your membership probably doesn't need to be there, or would have a very minimal impact on your actual business. So it's just worth thinking about, and then take baby steps, right?
Mhm.
See what happens if maybe you go, I would eliminate this 50%, but then maybe you start by eliminating 5% and see what happens, and then eliminate another 5% and just gradually work your way. Because if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, you're not headed to a good place. So the idea that you're going to just sort of keep going business as usual,
Yeah.
probably not going to work.
Okay.
So,
Cool. Thank
cool.
you. Very helpful.
Yep.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Who's next?
So we have Dennis up next. He has a bunch of questions, but we're going to start with the first couple, and then
Okay.
we're going to get him back in the queue. But his first couple of questions are about reactivating subscribers and email sequence stuff.
Cool. Hey, Dennis.
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Maybe just to start, I wanted to thank you, Josh, for your email. I actually implemented the anniversary email, whereby after a certain period, I send my users a discount. It helped me actually be able to generate some sales.
That's great.
Really,
Glad to hear
thank
it.
you for that. Yeah, so one of my questions was, so when people sign up for my email list, so I teach people how to trade. So when people sign up for it, I usually give them a one-time offer to, if you're interested in the course, just click on this contact form and I'll be able to send you the special offer. I don't want just them to view the page and either buy or not. I want to be able to know who is actually interested. But then most of them, even after I send them the discount, which is quite a large discount, actually go quiet. They don't actually respond saying whether or not they want the discount or not. So for such people who have shown interest, not only by, let's say, by that email, or also doing something in the realm of checking who is looking at my sales page multiple times, so that I know they're also interested. But I'm just wondering, like, what kind of email sequence should I consider implementing, so that maybe if you've shown interest, I can send you certain kinds of emails just to be able to maybe try and deal with your objections, so that, or even get to know what those objections are. Yeah. That's one.
Sure. So I would say a couple of things. So the first I would say is it's easy to confuse interest with curiosity. So depending what your prompt is, right? Keep in mind, depending how you frame it and what you ask them, there's no cost to them to say, oh, I'll click this thing and send me the thing. Doesn't necessarily mean they're interested in the thing. They might just be curious about the thing, right?
Yeah.
So in your mind, you're going, well, they said they were interested and then they disappeared and I don't understand. But maybe they were just curious to see what it was. They might not be as interested as you think they are. So some of it is thinking about how you frame it and what you talk about up front to get that click. Because typically what we all do is like, I want to frame it in a way to get as many clicks as possible.
Yes.
So we lean towards driving curiosity, but that's not the same as interest. And then it doesn't, convert as well. So that's one thing to sort of think about. The other thing is right now, when they click that, they essentially get your offer and get with the discount. But my guess is there's nothing for them to do if they don't buy or aren't ready to buy. They just go quiet, right?
Yeah.
So what you might want to do is you might want to say, hey, here's the offer. But if you're not sure if it's for you, or you're not quite ready to buy or whatever, I've got some other free resources. I've got some other stuff for you. Are you interested in A, B, or C topics? What do you want to know more about? And that then triggers free information that gets you into your sequences, which can be very simple, right? So I don't know what your topic is, but I'll just give you an example, like if it were me, right? So if I was selling a course on how to grow your newsletters, and let's say I had the same setup that you did, and they click it and I go, hey, you can get the course with the discount, blah, blah, blah. I would add something into that email and say, if you're not sure if it's for you or you're not ready yet, maybe you just want to learn a little more about newsletter growth. Would you like to know how to do paid growth, or would you like to know how to do free growth? I'll send you some more resources. So now you've gone from a binary, either they buy or they go silent, to either they buy or they say what they want more info on, which gets them a sequence, even if that sequence is just another individual email, but it might draw them closer. The other thing it does in using that hypothetical scenario is, I know if they clicked on organic growth, that they're interested in organic growth. So now, besides giving them resources on that, the next time I pitch my course, I might play up the organic growth piece.
Yes.
Or if they clicked for paid growth resources, the sequence is going to give them those resources, but now I'm going to play up. Oh, did you know this course also teaches you tactics for paid growth, blah, 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 blah. Right. Yes. Now you're getting, and that'll also give you a filter where if they don't want either the organic or paid growth resources, they're probably not interested. They were just curious initially.
Yes.
Right. So that's how I would do it. I would build in some options so that they don't just get the, hey, here's the offer, buy it, or I'll never see you later. Right.
Yes.
Buy it or take another step closer with more free stuff, if that makes sense. Or the other thing you can have, by the way, is if you don't already in that offer, invite them to reply and ask questions. Like, you'll give them some free advice. Like I do this all the time with stuff where it's like, hey, I sometimes people will reach out to me and they'll say, oh, I want to hear about your coaching or consulting. And I'll say, here's how it works. Here's what it costs, blah, blah, blah. If you just have a quick question, I'm happy to give you some free advice. And what will happen sometimes is they won't be ready to buy. They'll reply and they'll say, oh, actually, like, what would you say about this? And then I go back to them, give them some advice. And now suddenly they're ready to buy because they're like, oh, that was really helpful. I wonder what I would get on a call. So that's how I would think about it. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Maybe quickly, the reason why I put that link for people to request for the discount, I was afraid if I put the discount on the one-time page, let's say 80% off, and then they don't buy, later on when I try and pitch to them, I was feeling as if maybe they might not buy because they feel I missed a large discount before. So buying it now, maybe at the regular price might be a problem. So is that a genuine worry, or should I just go ahead and put the discount on the page?
I think it's okay to do it like that. I like that. For example, one of the things I do that I started recently that people don't know is when people buy ads in my newsletter, after their ad runs, I send them an email saying, hey, here's how your ad performed. But side note, it's amazing how many people don't pay attention to how their ad performed. But I send them and I go, oh, here's how many clicks it got, et cetera. It looks like assuming it went well, I go, it looked like my audience enjoyed it. I'd be happy to give you a discount on any future ads you want to buy this week. That's not publicly on my site saying if you buy an ad, you'll get a discount on future buys. I only do that in the email. So that's a version of what you're talking about, which I think is fine. Because I think if you start posting discounts on a site, then it's not really a discount. You've just basically changed the price of the product.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other quick question I had was, for those who signed up for my course, there's usually marketing to them before they buy makes sense. But I was just wondering, what kind of sequence should I send to people who've already signed up for the course? Maybe just to encourage them to continue studying the course, because I'm a bit stumped in terms of what to send to them, because I feel they're already in the course, let them do the course. And then maybe emails I should think about sending.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends what you want. And I think obviously it's in your best interest for them to do it and get value. So whatever is going to help them do that, I would actually have conversations with a couple buyers and say, hey, I'm trying to figure out, thank you so much for buying. I'd love to know, what would you find helpful? Or even after they've gone through it, what would you have found helpful, right? Talk to them about what would you want? Would you want me to check in with you? Would you want me to send you an email? I don't know how long the course takes, but would you want me to send you an email a couple of days later and say, hey, do you have any questions as you're going through it? Do you know, so that's what I would do. Those conversations will be helpful for you to figure out what they would find helpful.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
End there for now. Thanks, Emily.
Yep.
All right. Up next is Glenn and has a question about making the most about past newsletters or with past newsletters.
Sure.
Hey Josh, thanks for this.
Hey.
Really generous. I've
Yeah, no
got
problem.
a couple of related questions actually. Give you a little bit of background. So I used to work for an online entrepreneur. I was working behind the scenes building his courses. I left that business to set up my own business and teaching people how to build their own courses. So I wanted to start a newsletter. I needed an audience. So what I did, I plowed a lot of effort into a course, like a cohort course that I ran for free. I got the guy I used to work for to promote it, and I got like 500 people onto a newsletter, onto an email list based on that. So fast forward about 18 months, I haven't really grown that list much. I've done quite a good job of keeping them on the list. My newsletter, people like it. I get a good open rate. But this course I ran is now set up on ConvertKit as like an email fed newsletter. So it's 20 short videos. They're fun. People like them. And I use it as a lead magnet. But what I'm kind of conscious of is I've got this resource that took a lot of effort for me to pull together. I've got 80 odd newsletters that are like in the archives that aren't doing very much. And I'm just wondering how to make best use of that, because I'm wondering if my 4-week course is a brilliant lead magnet. Maybe that's too much of a commitment for people. It also means they have to wait 4 weeks before they get even one newsletter from me. So I'm wondering whether I should just stick all those videos up on YouTube or something, and maybe they'll attract some of their own traffic. And I'm wondering what to do with all those newsletters that people seem to like, but I'm writing a new one each week. So do I have some autoresponder to feed that out? Do I package it up into some other lead magnet? So those are my kind of two questions. What to do
what's the ultimate goal?
My ultimate goal is I have a program which is kind of in beta at the moment, and I want to get people on a course called Build Your Best Course, which gives them a roadmap for creating their own course. So ultimately, I want them on the newsletter, and I want them to warm up to enroll on my program.
Okay. So a few thoughts here. So the first is 4 weeks, 20 videos feels like a lot for people to go through. I would look at potentially, depending how that goes, I'm guessing there's sort of different categories and stuff of video, but maybe you break that into actual like mini courses. So there's like I don't know what the topics are, right? But there might be one might be like how to build your course. Like let's say
basically is like a whistle-stop tour through course creation. So it covers everything, but on a fairly shallow level. And the way that it's set up in ConvertKit, which is meant to be fun, but maybe counterproductive. If they don't engage each week, they get kicked off the course. So it's like if we drop it below 50 miles an hour, the bus explodes type.
But could you package those videos, right? So could you say, like, again, I don't know how it works, but could you say like, here's 4 or 5 videos are about how to set up your course, and 5 videos are about how to get people to buy your course, and 5 videos are about how to manage your course students or whatever, right?
Week 1 is clarity on who the course is for. Week 2 is like curriculum design. Week 3, it's
so potentially packaging those into separate mini courses that function as lead magnets would be one way to do it, right? And people might buy all of them because they want sort of all of them, but they also might go, and it would also tell you something about where they are in their course journey, which would then allow you to tailor your offer at the end of those sequences. And it would just make the sequences much shorter because now they're 5 days and they're in, and you can, at the end of that, push the next one, right? Oh, you made it through these 5. Maybe you want the next 5 as opposed to a binary, like opt in for 20 and see you in a month and whatever. Right. So that's one thing that I would do. And by the way, those sequences, depending how you do it, I'm saying 5, but it could be 3 videos. It could be 2 videos. It could be whatever. You could also recut and combine some of them into longer videos potentially. Right. So you can play with the content in that way and figure it out. But I would think that you could shrink it and maybe wind up with multiple different lead magnets out of it. As far as your past newsletters, assuming they're relatively evergreen, right? They're not topical, there's a bunch of different things you could do with it. So one is all that content could go on your website and be treated like blog posts and be resources that anyone could access. Like it doesn't just have to be delivered by email, right?
I am doing that, but the logic is just maybe Google will find it. I don't other than having like a link to the archives on my sign up page, I'm not really doing anything with it.
Right. But are they structured like sort of newsletters, or are they structured like blog posts, like on specific topics?
They're structured like newsletters because the format is I start with like a personal story and then segue into something relevant. So they look, and I have blog posts on the site, but so they look quite different.
So you might want to just consider looking at them and going like, okay, if I'm putting this content on the website, what is the best way for me to get the most value out of it? Right.
Okay.
Whether that's Google search, whether also they become resources for you to send people, right? So so for example, let's say you wrote something about how to figure out how many modules to have in your course, right?
Okay.
You might send a new newsletter today that's about something else, but has a reference to, speaking of modules, have you checked this out? And you're driving people to the site, which you wouldn't do with a sort of traditional newsletter. So driving people into your archives from the new newsletters and repurposing that content, if you use socials, Twitter threads, or whatever, that's the way I would think about the archives, as opposed to like, yes, you could have a thing where people can opt in and go through, past issues and sequences and all that kind of stuff. But to me, it's more like get it on your website in a public place and then leverage other things where you can always be driving back to it. And that's how you'll get value out of it. In your video course, in your lead magnet, right? Each video could also come with a link to relevant articles on your site. So everyone that's going through is now going back into that archives. So to me, the first step is get the valuable content from those archive newsletters onto the site, format in a way that makes sense on the site, not just like copy and paste, like you don't want the post starting out with like, hey, welcome to this week's newsletter. You know what I mean? And then leverage all the stuff you have to drive people into it. And you'll still get, hopefully you'll get search traffic as well, but you'll also be able to sort of direct it. And that's how I would leverage a lot of that stuff.
That's awesome. Thanks, Josh. One last thing I wanted to say is 50 of the people that I got on that course came from an ad on your newsletter. So
there you go. Glenn going for the MVP of this first jam session. Glad to hear it. All right, Emily, who's next?
Steph is up next with a question about newsletters and email marketing.
Cool. Hey, Steph.
Hi. Okay, first things first, the episode today where you and Emily were doing a behind the scenes of the skills session was such a gem. I love behind the scenes stuff.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
Thank you for that. So, okay, I'm in constant experimentation mode, and it was like the podcast and YouTube came first, then the business came second, and the newsletter came third. And I've really been enjoying my newsletter for the past couple of years, just revamped it. But I've been putting like my products and services here and there within the newsletter, but I don't have an email marketing sequence. And I know I keep hearing what the difference is, and somebody in the chat room is kind enough to reiterate it again. But when I do put it in the newsletter, I do get views and sales. So I don't know if I want to take it out, but I do feel like it's time that I need an email sequence. So but I don't want to double bombard people. I don't want to double email them about the same thing. So what are those nuanced differences if you're doing both? Like,
it's a good question. So I think, again, there's no one right way to do it. And I will say that, email marketing sequences are fine. They can be helpful. You shouldn't feel like you have to do it. I don't really do it, to be honest. And if you do it, and I shouldn't say that, I do it a little bit, but I do it in very small, simple ways. So I'll give you an example. So when someone subscribes to my newsletter, these are the only automated emails they get. They get the welcome email when they first subscribe, right? Which I've shared before. And you guys, a lot of you, I'm sure, have seen and asked them to reply and that kind of stuff. And then 30 days later, they get a happy 1-month anniversary email. And that email says, hard to believe, but you've been reading my newsletter for a month. I just want to say thanks. I hope you're getting value out of it. And I got a little gift for you. It's a discount on any one of my skill sessions. Reply and let me know which one you'd want. I'll give you a 50% discount on that individual one. So it's a sales email, but it's not a random sales email. I tied it to the peg of 1 month anniversary.
Right.
So my advice for you, if you want to feel like I'm not just sort of doubling up, you want to give a reason of why you're emailing them, which is sort of what you're saying, right? So I tied it to a 1 month anniversary. You could easily do that, right? Like I might add another one at some point that's like, hey, it's been 3 months, it's been 6 months, and I just wanted to reach out. And if you have any questions or whatever, and by the way, have you checked out my skill sessions or my podcast, whatever it is, right? But I think that's an easy way to do it. And also a lot of times people feel like, oh, I need a sequence of 7 and 8 emails. Like, no, like you don't need.
My brain doesn't work that way.
But to your point, and by the way, like that 1 month anniversary gift email works well for me.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm offering a discount and, and there's a reason for the discount and they sort of feel special. Like, oh, there's a surprise and delight to it a little bit. So basically I'm sending them a sales email, but they sort of feel like, oh, that's cool. And I'm, and I get a discount on whatever I want and whatever. That's what I would recommend, right? Whether it's a 1 month anniversary, whether it's, I don't necessarily do this, but you could also tie it to people who click specific links. You could say, hey, I noticed you read that article about this. Maybe you'd be interested in this, right? Or do it, that can creep people out, which I'm sure is what you're gonna ask. So I might do that and not mention that it's because they click that, but I know it's because they click that. So I might say, I'll give you an example, right? So I recently did a group coaching program called Inbox to Invoice that was to help people with newsletters use their newsletters to get clients. So I had an article a blog post that I had written that I shared in my newsletter that was how to use your newsletter to get clients. Anyone that clicked that is a good candidate for my group coaching program. I at least know they're interested. So I sent those people a sales email. I didn't say it's because you clicked this, but I didn't send it to my whole list. I sent that extra sales email to people that I knew would be interested in it. So that's another way that you can do it is your sequences that you create don't necessarily have to go to everybody, right? They could go to specific people that based on what they've clicked are interested in something.
I'm wondering, I love that 1 month one. And I'm wondering if the first time somebody buys a course, if there's a sequence I can do for that. Not necessarily.
So one other one that I do run is when people buy an individual skill session, they get an email saying, I think the subject line is something like a bonus for you since you bought the session. And I say, if you watch it and like it and want to upgrade to the membership, I'll refund your initial purchase. So technically that's an email marketing sequence, but it's literally just one email after they buy. And that works well also.
Love it. Yay.
I want that relaxed sigh to be my new tagline. I don't know how to spell that, but that's my new skill sessions tagline. That's my entire goal. My entire goal is just people to give a relaxed sigh.
Seriously, because the thought of I don't do long sequences in my head. I'll think of one reaction to something, but that's where it stops. So that's why I've never set these up before. So having those one-off sequences is absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Yay. Thank you.
Cool. Emily, who's next? By the way, just for everyone that's on, so I know we're coming up on an hour. I'm, as long as people have questions, I'm good to stay till at least 12:30. So feel free to stay or not, or whatever, but go ahead, Emily, who's next?
Nolan is next, and he has a quick question about when you first started your newsletter.
Cool. Hey, Nolan.
Hey, what's up, Josh? Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah.
So, and if you've already answered this somewhere, if it exists online, feel free to just send a link. But
sure,
if you could get in your time machine and think back to when you first started your list, I was wondering what are the things that move the needle most in terms of growing your subscriber count? And the second part of that question is, what are the things that you thought you were supposed to do and spent a lot of time doing, but didn't have any impact at all?
Good question. So it's going to be a little bit of a complicated answer. So my current newsletter, which I started about 7 years ago, actually started when I folded 3 existing newsletters I was running into one. So I've been doing newsletters for years, but to make a long story short, and I was always starting and stopping and abandoning them, blogs and newsletters, right? I was always like, oh, I'll do this. And then I'd, bail on it, whatever. But I wound up at a point about 7 years ago where I was running 3 newsletters that were each relatively successful. And, they had built an audience, but there wasn't really overlap. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But so one was a newsletter called Connected Comedy, which was about basically social media marketing advice for comedians. And that one, each of these newsletters had a few thousand people on them, basically a couple thousand, 4,000, whatever it was. So that one really was built by, for the most part, a blog that I was writing every day. And people would see the content and they would sign up. And I would say in the early days for all of this, putting out content, specifically written content, specifically blog posts, I wasn't doing videos or podcasting or any of that. People would find that stuff and then they would subscribe, right? I was never a big SEO guy. So I was getting some search traffic, but that wasn't my priority. For that one, the comedy world is very much a community. So some comedians would see it and then be like, oh, you got to read this article. Like they're very interconnected, so that it sort of spread that way. And that's how that one built. I also had a Facebook group. Again, this is a long time ago. So like early sort of Facebook, you could get audiences relatively easy and, et cetera. And so it would convert them to newsletter subscribers. So I had that. Then I started a site called apersonyoushouldknow.com. And literally every day I would do these mini profiles of, what's interesting is now I realize they were like solopreneur creative types. But at that time, like that wasn't even, I was just like, it was literally like people that are sharing their expertise online. And I did that over time and people sort of found it. There's a woman named Tina Roth Eisenberg who goes by Swiss Miss and who's like an early blogger and has a big audience. And she somehow found it. I think I had actually featured her in it and she really liked it and she shared it and a bunch of her people then subscribed. So again, sort of grassroots, no magic marketing tact, but it built up again, a couple thousand followers. Although again, just like with Connected Comedy, literally blogging like every day, putting content out there, people found it valuable. Then I started blogging myself on joshspector.com. And so I had a list tied to that. So I wound up with these 3 lists, right? Comedians who were getting comedy advice, a person you should know, which was not even me. It was just me profiling. I wasn't interviewing them. I was literally just sharing links to stuff that people had created. And then my own blog posts on my own site. And that was, to make a long story short, like that was unsustainable. And I was like, what could I do? Is there a way I could combine all these? Like I should have one newsletter. So I combined the 3, and the original format For the Interested was sort of these 10 broad items. And I realized I could fit all of this stuff in there, right? If I wrote something about comedians, I could fit it in there. If I wrote something on my own blog, I could put it in there. If I did a profile of somebody else, I could put it in there. So obviously, some of those people unsubscribed because some people only wanted, one of those things and whatever. But I wound up with around 6,000 or 7,000 subscribers. So that's quote unquote the start of my current newsletter, even though it sort of came out of multiple other things. Okay. But I guess the short answer to your question is valuable content. Like if you're starting today, my advice would be valuable content that provides specific value to a specific audience. That will help, right? Make it a no-brainer for somebody to subscribe. None of, newsletter ads, newsletter recommendation tools work really well. I use Sparkloop now. I do cross promotions with people. I wasn't doing any of that stuff back in the day. I did used to run Facebook ads. I don't anymore. That helped early on. I got some subscribers from that. But yeah, mostly it's good content and that kind of stuff. What, are you just launching a newsletter? Is that why you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, in short, that's why I'm asking. I also am wondering how niche I should go in terms of, you said specific content for specific people. And
what's the newsletter you're thinking about doing or are already doing? What is it?
Yeah, so my idea is that the perspectives on what is success and what is an entrepreneur have an opportunity to be shifted. Because most of what's in the world, I think, is basically like, Steve Jobs or Silicon Valley, Mark Zuckerberg, everyone that's being profiled. For the most part is coming out of Silicon Valley, and success is like, we're a unicorn, you know? And I see this huge hole in the media world where that needs to be filled with all of the entrepreneurs from the rest of the world that have their own definition of success. You know, whatever success means to you, I think is worth profiling. So basically, it's like the anti-Silicon Valley newsletter, and then shining the spotlight on people who are, you know, from, my ultimate goal is from every single country in the world, we can profile an entrepreneur.
Okay. So that's, and I, by the way, I agree. And I think that's a good potential niche. My question would be, who is it for and what transformation does it help them make?
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to ask the second question. The truth is, I don't know.
Okay.
The basic idea.
So let me give you, you want me to give you a hypothetical? Okay. So here's a hypothetical. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be successful in whatever my definition of success is. And you can part of what you're talking about is redefining success from a traditional Silicon Valley, whatever. You can figure out what that means. Maybe that means not raising venture capital. Maybe that, I don't know. There's a bunch of different things that you can get into about what that means, right?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is trying to figure out how to be a quote unquote successful entrepreneur, with successful defined by whatever that means, right? Without doing all the things that the media and everyone's constantly telling me it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, right? And your newsletter exists. It's not just that you're saying, hey, here's examples of people who have done it other ways, but you're saying, here's examples of people who have done it other ways that you can learn from so that you can do it this other way. It's that step that takes you from just sharing information to helping them make a transformation, right? So it's not just, here's an example of a really successful. So I'll give you an example of someone who does this who's sort of a little bit around your niche. There's a woman named Cody Sanchez. Are you familiar with her at all?
Yeah, for sure.
So, right. So a big part, now Cody does a lot of, like, some of Cody's somewhat in a world that you probably don't want to be in, but but there's a part, you know, her thing about, and I forget the exact term she used, but the idea of like boring businesses, right? Of like, you know, laundromats, like you don't need to build the next Facebook, like go buy laundromats and go buy parking garages. And like, that is taking a stance of saying a version of what you're talking about, right? Of like, you can be a successful entrepreneur without doing the typical Silicon Valley thing, right? So I think if you know, and I think she's carved a nice niche for herself within that attracts those people that are like, oh yeah, I want to learn from her how to do this. And I think that's a version of where you want to go, right? You need to clearly define for yourself. I believe that there's a different way to do this entrepreneurship thing to get X, Y, and Z, whatever you're defining success as. And the people that want that, come on over here, because I'm going to show you the people that are doing it. I'm going to show you how they're doing it. And I'm going to give you stuff that's going to help you accomplish that. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I intuitively get it. I think the thing that I'm struggling with is how to not to, you know, no offense, anyone who's super into writing blog posts, but I actually don't want it to be like a blog posty feeling, you know, like here's 5 ways you can be your definition of success or whatever, or every single week a newsletter is like, here's a formula to do this. And it feels too robotic to me. So the approach that I'm taking actually with content is basically journalism and narrative stories. Okay. And I'm trying to figure out how to marry those two things. Or maybe that's not possible. Maybe it's just, this is entertainment and nothing else. It
definitely is possible. But I think from a business standpoint, then you want to figure out, you're probably not monetizing so you can always either sell to your audience or sell your audience to others. So if you think about journalism or what you're talking about, you're probably attracting an audience that you then want to sell to others. And I know that can sound bad, but I don't mean that to sound bad. What it actually means though, is your customer is probably a sponsor, an advertiser, a company, an organization who wants to reach people interested in those stories. you can absolutely do that. You just need to, in your own mind, understand that that's what you're building.
Yeah, I get
And,
that.
and have that alignment. And then you need to figure out, okay, on the business side, who's going to want to reach these people? And how many of these people do I need to be reading this stuff for it to work and function, right? It's just a different business model. It can work just as well. You don't have to go the sort of actionable, I'm training people how to do this stuff, but you need to be aware in your own mind that, okay, if I'm going to go the other way, again, if you're talking about this as a business and monetizing it in some way, if you're just doing it as an exercise because you want to do it, that's great. That's awesome. But if you're talking about it as a business, you got to figure out, what do I actually need for people to pay to reach this audience? And the one thing I would caution there or say is, depending on the business model, it doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional, like, massive amounts of numbers, right? So if you find a sponsor that is, I'm making this up, an accelerator, an investor, somebody who wants to invest in these types of entrepreneurs, they might go, I don't care if you have 10,000 readers or 1,000. I'm just looking to find the 5 that I'm going to partner with to build these kind of businesses, right? That's very different than someone who's like, I sell an accounting tool and I want to reach a ton of entrepreneurs to sell my $20 a month SaaS product or whatever, right? So thinking that through and then structuring it in a way that's going to do that is where I would sort of focus on.
Got it. Okay, that I don't want to take up too much more
It
time,
can work. It's just a different model. And looking at and studying, because I think other people make the mistake of, they go, study the newsletters or the media businesses that are doing that versus the ones that are selling directly to their audience. Don't copy tactics of someone who's trying to monetize their audience directly when you're trying to build a business that's going to sell your audience to other people.
For sure.
Cool.
Would you say that it's fair that given what you know now, that it's still viable to just say our audience is young entrepreneurs?
It's viable, but I would try to get more specific, because I don't think based on what you said, I don't think your audience is young entrepreneurs. I think it's young entrepreneurs who are of a specific type or believe a specific thing, right? You want to narrow down. And one of the things that you can do also is, it's helpful to make a list of who you're not for. So, like, sit down and be like, it's not, okay, it's young entrepreneurs, but it's not on young entrepreneurs that believe X, Y, and Z, or that do this or that whatever, right? That can be really helpful in clarifying for yourself who this is for, as opposed, by the way, are you a Skill Sessions member yet?
Not officially. I've just bought some one-off ones.
Did you buy the niche definer?
I don't think so. I bought the relationship one and
okay. So you'll find the niche definer really helpful, because it's literally all about how to define your niche, like we're talking about. So Emily, if you want to put a link to that in the chat. And by the way, if you want to upgrade to a membership, I'll refund one of your other purchases and you'll get all of them. So let me know.
I probably need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. What do we got, Emily?
Next up is Gabrielle. She has a question about starting an email list for her new business.
Cool.
Hi there. Thanks. This has been so helpful. I've just been gaining so much wisdom. I'm in the very early stages because I'm trying to basically be like my own client. I have a bit of a marketing background. And so now that I'm wanting to do coaching work, like mind, body, spirit, coaching for women, and I'm very well qualified to do so, but I've had like the imposter syndrome, and I'm like, now just like gonna freaking go for it. I've kind of been reverse. Thank you. I've been kind of reverse engineering, and I like relate a lot to what Steph said earlier about like wanting to do all the things and needing to like focus on one thing first. Like it's like, I'm building an audience on Instagram, that I started a new Instagram account and like grew it to like almost 700 followers pretty quickly. And I'm like, now I'm thinking I'm a writer at heart. Like I do love the blogging kind of narrative style, editorial style of things. And like my audience does like to read Substacks and blogs, and I see that trend. So I'm like, does it make sense to start a brand new email list? Because I never really had one for this business to start with, and try to monetize it on Substack eventually? Or am I getting ahead of myself and I don't even have a website yet? Like, gonna have to do one of the skill session like niching
right.
things, but just I was curious to pick your brain, just kind of generally speaking, informally, on like, if you were in my shoes, what would be your first?
What's the goal? Like what's the result that you want to have happen?
So basically, my ideal client is me like 7 years ago, feeling super stuck, lost, and not having the confidence or like the purpose of like what I actually want to do with my life. So I just want women to feel super empowered and where they're going. I know it's a very saturated niche, but I also I'm a certified intuitive, and I have a whole like woo-woo side of my business as well. So, but I want to appeal to like the very grounded, practical, like people who are just like mind, body, spirit. I want to get my life back on track, habits. And then I also want to appeal to the people who are into like the super esoteric wisdom, because like I also can.
And what do you, obviously you want to help those people, but what do you want? You want them to hire you as a coach? What do you want them to do?
Yeah, I would love to start with one-on-one sessions. And I have a lot of ideas on that, because like this is literally the very beginning. I kind of feel like I'm coming out of the entrepreneurial closet almost. So it's like,
good for you.
Yeah, it's exciting, but it's also, I feel like I'm sounding very rambly and not put together. So I need
you're sounding like everybody that comes out of the entrepreneurial closet.
Yeah. So
and Emily nodding her head. She knows. She came out of the closet like a month ago.
Like a month ago.
It's so exciting, but then it's also like a little overwhelming, because you want it to be succinct and packaged, which is why like I was attracted to especially your newsletters, because it's very to the point. No people's attention spans are like goldfish. So basically, but yeah, I do want them to be able to, I mean, they can even book readings with me. Like I said, I don't know what the audience here is.
So here's what I would do. There's a million, and this is where it gets like really overwhelming for people, right? Because there's a million opportunities out there and things that you feel like you should do, right? Like I should be on Instagram, I should be on TikTok, and I should have a blog, and I should have a newsletter, and I can help people this way, and I can help people that way, and I can whatever. So shrink all of that down when you're starting and make it as simple as you can, right? So go, here's what I want to have, and know this, right? You can succeed in infinite amount of paths. So I'm not saying you're not going to do multiple things and you're not going to whatever, but you want to focus your effort. So like you might say, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to figure out whatever you most want to do, right? You go, I want to do 1 hour coaching calls with this kind of, I'm making this up, but like this kind of woman who's in this place and wants to get to this place. And I'm the way I'm going to package my expertise is it's a 1 hour coaching call, or it's a call a week for a month, or however you want to package it, right? Everything you're doing, social media, content, all that other stuff is just a tactic to accomplish a goal, right? So it's not about, yes, it's great to have a bigger audience and blah, 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 but it doesn't really matter, right? If all you're trying to do is get one person to book that one service that you most want to sell, you're just focused on that. Right. So the question doesn't become, well, oh, if I do blogs, that'll get me more people. And how do I get my Instagram from 700 to 7,000? Who cares? Your goal is not to get to 7,000 Instagram followers. It's to get one person to book a call with you, or 5 people to book calls with you, or whatever. Then everything, the biggest problem I see people struggle with is an alignment between what they're doing with content and their ultimate goals. Right. So if your goal is to get people, you want to reverse engineer all of it, right? So if your goal is, I want to get people to hire me for this 1 hour coaching call where this thing's going to happen and this transformation is going to happen. You go, who do I need to reach to do that? Who do I most want to help with that? Who is most likely to benefit from that? Who is most likely to want that? It's women who are in X, Y, and Z position.
Right.
What do I post content wise to pull them to me? And typically it's how can I give them value to help them get there for free? Because once they look, this is very meta, but like, what are we doing right now? Right? Like we're having this conversation. I'm helping you do this for free. You may or may not hire me. You may or may not become a Skill Sessions member, but you're going to be a lot more likely to do so than you were before we had this conversation. And other people are seeing me help you, which is going to make them more likely to do it. Right. So drilling down and going, how can I help people on Instagram or a blog or whatever I choose to do with the specific things that they want, that I can help them in a bigger way on a coaching session, all of your effort becomes focused and is getting where you want to go, right? The question you're asking is, how do I turn one of the 700 people who are following me on Instagram into a buyer of my course? Not how do I go from 700 to 7,000 followers on Instagram? What happens though, is as you do that, you wind up building a bigger audience and getting more people, right? It's just that that's not your goal. It's not how you're measuring success. And for you, it allows you like literally figure out what that one end result is, write it down if you want on a piece of paper or whatever. And everything you're doing, right? The question doesn't become, should I have a blog or not? The question becomes, if I published a blog post, what blog post would help me get this client? Right.
Yeah.
And
No,
it's
this is
not,
so helpful.
am I going to blog every week for the next 6 years? It's, if I spend 2 hours writing a blog post, will I wind up with an asset that's going to help me get a client to book this thing potentially? And it probably will, right? Like, so I think that's where you want to think, but it has to start with the end result that you want. And then everything else aligns and comes out of that. And know also that it's going to evolve over time, right?
Yeah. I think I was putting the cart before the horse a bit. And it's ironic because for my own clients, I kind of was doing exactly all the right steps, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as it's about me and you're trying to be your own client, you start overthinking things and overcomplicating it. But that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, ultimately, the reason why I know this is something I want to do, I would do all this stuff for free. Like I love it that much. And ultimately, I do just want to change lives and serve women. And like, not to be completely corny here, but it's like, that is why this has become kind of this issue for me, is that I'm like, I don't even want to really charge that much, but I know I have to, if this is what I want to spend more time and cast the net wide. It's not because I want to have 10,000 followers to look cool. It's because I want to cast the net wide to see, I know it's a numbers game, you know what I mean? So I appreciate you reframing that. And like,
my advice also is focus on even on social, one-on-one interactions.
Right.
So a specific interaction you have with someone in the DMs is way more likely to get you a client than just posting sort of your posts, right? And even the stuff that you're doing, even if it's not in the DMs, even if it's public, right? One of the reasons I'm doing this is because this is a collection of one-on-one interactions that are not only going to help you, but help other people who see it. It's way more specific. It's way more helpful. So do that, right? Do it, when you do an Instagram post, prompt people to reach out to you with questions. I call them like micro coaching tweets all the time where I'm like, want me to review your newsletter sign-up page, or like, you have a question, like anything. Like, again, if you like giving that help, it's not hard to do that. And that ultimately will do much more to then grow your business and grow your audience and sort of all of that stuff.
Amazing. Thank you again. This is so valuable.
No problem. Emily, what do we got?
Erica is up next. She has a podcast question.
Cool. Hey, Erica.
Hello. I have a question regarding my podcast. I started it about 3 months ago, and it releases every Tuesday. And I wanted to figure out what's the best way that I can use my content. They run anywhere from about 35 to 50 minutes for each episode. I started with just sending out an email on Tuesday saying, hey, the new episode is available or whatever. Now I want to get a little bit more proactive instead of just sending just that kind of email, just something that has more value. And I wanted to know, like, okay, I have all of this really great content because it's an interview style where I highlight people who decided to bet on themselves, because it's called the Me Bet podcast. So basically people who have, decided to go against the status quo, tradition, and do something for themselves, live on their own terms in business and in life. And so I'd like to figure out what's the best way to leverage all of this content, because we talk about a lot in these episodes. We talk about how they got started, why they did it, burnout, all kinds of things, if they have families, how, were they able to just walk away from corporate and start something new, and things like that. So I'm curious, what's the best way to take one episode and have different types of content? Right now, I am on, the only social I'm on is LinkedIn. because I think that's where my main audience is. And that's where I feel most comfortable right now, because I am in the same camp of get down one platform really well, and then I can branch out later. So I started off with LinkedIn and the podcast.
What do you ultimately want to happen?
I know.
Besides more listeners, or
Right.
is this tied to, is this a business? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish?
I have not, and you're right. I always think about let's work backwards first, but with this particular project, this one, I'm not quite sure, because I don't know if I necessarily want to sell a product to the audience, or if it's something where I'd like to maybe leverage the relationships that I build with my guests, or if there are sponsors later on down the road. Since I'm still kind of early in, I feel like that's kind of a fluid situation. I'm still in the process of audience building, so I'm not quite sure about that.
Okay. So for now, the basic goal is I want to get as much value as possible out of the time that I'm putting into it. Right.
Yeah.
So here's what I would do is when you have an episode, the first thing to do is identify what are the most valuable moments and concepts in it. Right. And, that doesn't just necessarily mean like the audio clips or whatever, but like, what are the ideas? Like, what is the most valuable stuff in this thing?
Okay.
And how, because that's what you're going to take and you're going to repurpose in whatever ways and build around. Right. So once you see what those are, right. And chances are, again, it depends, like you can pick however many there are, but let's say, there's probably a handful, right? 3 to 5, whatever. Right. And, when I say concepts, it doesn't necessarily just, so there might be, then you go, okay, what are the best ways for me to present this? So it might be the clip. It might be a LinkedIn post where you just explain in text what the person's concept was, right? I talked to so-and-so and she has this amazing morning routines are so played out, but she has this amazing morning routine and here's what it is, right? Maybe she spent 10 minutes talking about that morning routine, but as opposed to sharing the 10-minute clip, it's easier as a post, right? Here it is. She has this 5-step, step 1, step 2, step 3, so you're taking the actual underlying idea and underlying value. And then for each of those things, figuring out what is the best way for me to present this. Right. So that's the first part. The second part is, again, from a relationship standpoint, if you're doing that, let the person know, like, so let's use that example, right? Hey, I did this LinkedIn post where I basically translated what you said in 10 minutes into this graphic that has the 5 things, or into a LinkedIn post where I just listed the 5 things. I thought you might want to share it. It's your expertise. I thought you might want to share it with your audience, right? Now that person is sharing your post and you're providing them a service because they know they've always said this, but they've never really distilled it in that way, right? So that's growing your audience. That's also building your relationship with that person, et cetera. Okay. So I think that's how I would think about it. The other thing I would do, and again, maybe I'm talking about social, but it also might be a blog post. It might be whatever, right? The other thing I would say is when you are promoting your episode on social, and I'm going to say this, even though I should listen to some of my own advice, but that's a different story. Don't just say, hey, new episode's out this week. I talked to so-and-so about such and such, right? Don't do that.
Right.
Share the most valuable stuff in the content of the email, in the content of the LinkedIn. The best promotion to get someone to listen to the episode is to give them something incredibly valuable from it, not just tease it, right? So your email should be, using the example we did before, here's the smartest 5-step morning routine I have ever heard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what it is. By the way, if you want to hear more about what she said about it, including the amazing story behind how she came up with it, go listen to it here. Compare that to what most people do, which is this week's episode, I interview Susie. We talk about morning routines. Go click it.
Right.
Right. So always pulling from that and understanding that is actually the best way to promote the podcast, is to give them the good stuff that's in it, because when they get that, it's going to make them want to hear more.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Emily?
So that's pretty much it for questions. I know Peter did have a question for you earlier, but he pulled himself out of the queue. So I wanted to give him a chance to, if he wanted the last few minutes with you.
Hey, Josh.
Hey.
You and I have talked periodically about just trying to narrow down the niche, because I look at yours and it seems very broad, and I think you do a great job then of segmenting it. But in terms of trying to get people, of really trying to crystallize the two paths that I'm going down that have kind of it's almost like a 2-lane highway where it's all about questioning and doing a better job of questioning and doing, a better job of asking questions, but creating long form content that answers customer questions. But once I start talking about either I'm going to teach you to ask better questions, and then because of my experience in journalism, my 40 years and all that, I can ask your executives questions. I can write the long form content like case studies, RFP responses, and all that. And it's becoming really difficult for me to figure out, as I pivot a little bit, I'm an impatient type A, who wants to see results right away, but I'm not exactly sure how to get myself in a place where I can really build the list. I've started a newsletter. I've gone from a non-existent list to 45 in 2 weeks, which isn't bad. I mean, subscribers, and I'm getting an open rate north of 75%.
Great.
I'm just not sure, and maybe it's just that I need to go back to the niche definer class.
So let me ask you a question. So the result of the two paths, right? And we're talking about for your audience or for your clients, right? So one version is you're teaching them how to ask better questions. The other is you're sort of doing that stuff for them, right?
Right.
So, okay. So there's a teaching you to do it and there's a done for you sort of in a macro level version of this, right?
Yep.
What are the results that they're going to get from either of those paths?
Well, you're going to get through in the case of learning how to ask the questions, or the result of both paths, I think, is that you're going to get through the sales pipeline more quickly. You're going to get customers through the sales path because the funnel or the pipeline, because you're anticipating their questions and you're answering them, and you've got good answers to them. So it's a deal coaching and all that, but it's also giving you stronger content than just that chest pounding, we're so wonderful,
right?
And it's more about helping you be.
So that's the niche.
Right.
So, right, you're feeling like these things are sort of not aligned and they're two different things, but you're on the tactic level. The result of each path is the same.
Right.
So the niche is the result, and there's just two different ways that they can get that result. So what you're saying essentially is my audience are people that want this result. Here's different ways that you can get it, as opposed to saying, I am this, I am that. Okay. If that helps. The other thing that I would say, and you're right, it's interesting with niche, right? Like, yes, in some ways, my niche is very broad, but I think it's less about size of niche and about specificity, right? This is specifically what I'm going to help you with and how I'm going to help you. And by the way, it's a work in progress for me too. Like I've recently changed, I'm tweaking messaging of my skill sessions and stuff because just like everybody, right? Like, I forget, I think maybe it was Gabrielle who said it, but it's so much easier to help other people and see other people's stuff than to see your own. Right. And Emily knows this, like I'm tweaking stuff all the time and I'm going like, this just doesn't feel right. Like, I feel like there's stuff missing in how I talk about these skill sessions, because I feel like some of it doesn't, like, I know what it is and I know how it helps people, but then I look at it and I'm like, I don't think it's communicated clearly. Like, so all of this is a work in progress, and it's easier for me to look at other people and go, oh, you should do this. And you're missing this. And then I look at my own thing and I'm like, I don't know, I'm not doing a great job explaining this.
Do you agree that you are doing a good job and this is just your insecurity?
I'm sure that's a part of it, but I'm sure that's a part of it, but it's funny because I'll come across like, so one of the things that I realized recently, like I think I added to the headline, like something about like grow your audience and business without shady tactics. And that's something that seems obvious to me now, but like so much of the audience and business growth stuff out there is kind of shady stuff. And I don't do any of that. And there was somebody the other day, I think on Twitter, I had shared their thing, and it was like, their tactic was going onto Reddit and leaving comments and like working in plugs for their newsletter. And it was really smart, but they didn't mention it was their newsletter. Like it was also sort of shady. And like, that is not, even though I can see that as being an effective tactic, that's never something that I'm going to do. But my messaging never said that. Right. So if you didn't know me and you didn't know anything, you might, for better or worse, go, oh, it's an audience growth stuff. It's probably that kind of stuff. So adding that line of without shady tactics is another way for me to sort of more specifically explain my positioning in the market. The audience is still broad, but just that addition means, look, if you're looking for, that line of without shady tactics is going to make me more appealing to some people and less appealing to others who are like, I just want to grow at all costs. Right. And that's fine. Like, I'm not even necessarily judging it. It's just not me and not how I approach stuff. And it's going to attract more of the ideal. Right. So most of us are going to have audiences that are target audiences that are fairly broad. Like for you, right? Yeah. Who doesn't want to speed up the sales pipeline? Right. But there are probably specific narrowing things within that your work is for versus not. So yeah, some of it maybe is an insecurity, but I also think that there are things in my messaging that I have been missing that may be obvious to me, but not obvious to others.
Can I ask a very quick follow-up?
Yeah.
So if we've got the 2 ways I do it and then the overriding, move you through the sales process, raise your visibility, does it make sense that in some places, like trying to get subscribers to the newsletter, that you would lead with the this newsletter helps you ask better questions, it helps you tell better stories, and then on the website flip the order so that it's strategy first or end result first, tactics second, and then tactics first in the newsletter and end result at the end of that?
Yeah, you certainly can. I think it's a question for you of who you want to attract with it, right? So it can work. It can definitely work either way, but understand if you're going, this is going to, if you're using the newsletter to attract people that want to learn how to ask better questions, you're not attracting the people that want you to do it for them to the newsletter. You may attract them through other things, and that's fine, right? It's just understanding that whichever, do you want your newsletter to attract everyone that wants to speed up their pipeline, or do you want to use the newsletter to attract people that want to learn how to do it themselves?
Yeah. And the end of the newsletter is, here's the stuff I've done, and I'm trying to push them toward the idea of, if you want to learn this, but you just don't have the time, you can call me to do it for you.
Right. But keep in mind, if you're framing the newsletter as learning how to do it yourself, you're not going to get many of those people that want you to do it for them. Yeah. You're going to get the people that want to learn how to do it. Right. So yeah, you'll get some, and there's definitely overlap here, but just understanding that like, you're going to get what you put out there. Right. So for example, like me adding that line about shady tactics, the people that are going to inquire about skill sessions now are going to be different than before I had that line there. Overlap, but different. And just as importantly, their expectations will be different. Right. So yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. It's a wrap, Emily. First jam session in the book.
That's a wrap.
Books. Cool. Thank you, everybody. Again, as a reminder for anyone that's been watching this, this is the first of what will be monthly jam sessions. They will be part of the Skill Session membership and open only to Skill Session members. You can go to joshspector.com/sessions to become a member. It is just a $150 annual membership, and that gets you everything. Price goes up to $197 on May 23rd. So if you're thinking about it, now's a good time to do it. You get that price locked in for as long as you want it. You can cancel at any time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the questions. I felt like this was really valuable. I hope everybody else did as well.
Want to talk about the recording?
What do you mean?
Like we're going to put it up, or how you're going to, if they
Oh,
can-
yes. Yeah. So we are recording this. We're going to post it. I'm going to send it out in the next day or two. So everyone will be able to see it. And yeah, anyone who remembers, again, this is a new work in progress. So if you liked it, if you have feedback, if you have suggestions for next time, anything, feel free to email me and let me know. We also have a week from today, actually, is going to be the next regular skill session, which is going to be newsletter social strategy, which everybody voted for. Although it was very close, I think 2 votes separated that and the coaching kit. And I heard from a bunch of people who are like, I really want that coaching thing too. So we'll probably do that session at some point down the road as well. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Emily. I think that's it.
Thank you.
You guys.